In the most simplest way, a not racist is a racist who is in denial.
Yes, Greenville, South Carolina. I know that this is not what you're teaching. I get it. But I got a question for you. Why isn't this what you're teaching? I gotta think that the answer is you also know that this is absolutely insane. What that guy just said is 100% crazy nut psycho, insano flex to the max. We get it. But can one tree bear good fruit on one side and bad fruit on the other? Can a tree that used to bear good fruit now bear bad fruit? And is it possible that our educators do not know that it now bears bad fruit and are giving our children fruit from a poisonous tree? I'll leave that up to you. I will present my evidence. So, the first thing that we need to do is, make the trunk. There's two programs that I have on here. One is Second Step, and the other is Rethink Ed. I call it Rethinked because I think it's a joke on the parents. So I'll be calling it Rethinked. There's two SEL programs, and we need to connect them to Castle. Castle is the world's leading SEL developer, and they started SEL. And so everything, all the SEL programs, not all, most of them are like, oh, we're Castle compliant, blah, 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 blah. So let's see if we can make a trunk and a branch real hot quick. Ooh. One piece of paper did it. The piece of paper the website that I was told to go to for one of my kids' SEL classes. And as you can see, we have connected Committee for Children, Castle, and Second Step. That was super easy. Now, you can continue and look for connections with these three, and you won't stop for days finding them. Next. Let's go ahead and connect Rethinked to Castle.
What makes Rethink the first choice for SEL? Rethink is the first to provide on-demand video modules for adult learning and all the resources necessary to apply it in the classroom. The first Castle-aligned curriculum to meet the needs of all learners.
So look what we've got. We've got the SEL that most people are familiar with. First of all, take your time with the folks that only know this. How would they know anything else? And as pure as SEL has been, it's going to be a tough sell unless you show them something really definitive that their SEL has changed. Now, one more note before we move on. I'm not going to give the definition of critical race theory until the end. If critical race theory is not in our schools, well, then the definition at the end should be something new to you. We'll see what happens. For now, let's take a look at what happened to Castle. What changed? They'll give it to us from their own mouths.
We believe that there is no system more important than education to fighting against racism. And we believe that our work in social and emotional learning must actively contribute to anti-racism. And we've prioritized issues of equity in the center of our work for a long time. And we see SEL as a tool for anti-racism. We also know that the education system itself needs transformation. It needs to support all children and adults in building on their interests, helping to create positive identities, eliminating biases, strengthening relationships across differences, and co-creating communities where all individuals can thrive.
And so it sounds like you do make that distinction then between not racist and anti-racist. And I guess could you talk a little bit more about that and break that down? What is the difference between the two?
In the most simplest way, a not racist is a racist who is in denial. And an anti-racist is someone who is willing to admit the times in which they're being racist and who is willing to recognize the inequities and the problems of racial problems of our society, and who is willing to challenge those racial inequities by challenging policy. And so I'm talking about groups. And if you believe the groups are equals, then the only other alternative, the only other explanation to persisting inequity and injustice is power and policy. And to then spend your time transforming and challenging power and policy is to spend your time being anti-racist.
When we talk about white privilege, we talk also about the privilege not to have the difficult conversations. Do you feel that's starting to change?
I hope so. And because I think that white Americans too need to simultaneously recognize their privileges, the privileges that they have accrued as a result of their whiteness. We should vote into office people who, from school boards to the President of the United States, people who are committed to instituting anti-racist policies that lead to equity and justice.
CASTL's been working for many years to advance the understanding of both the research and the implementation of SEL in service of equity.
Today, we are talking about equity and equality. But you might be wondering, wait, aren't these the same thing? No, in fact, they're really different concepts, even though a lot of us get the two confused. So let's break them down. You probably already know what we mean when we say equality. We're talking about two things that are the same or have a similar value. When we treat two people or two groups of people equally, we make sure that they have or get the same things. For example, if I want to give Betty some apples, then I need to give Ben the same number of apples to treat them with equality. Along the same lines, if I want to give the nursing program a budget increase, then I need to make sure that I give the culinary arts program the same budget increase to treat them with equality. But that's not the same thing as equity. Equity can be defined as giving everyone what they need to be successful. In other words, it's not giving everyone the exact same thing. And here's where the difference between equity and equality really come in. Because it's important to remember that if we give everyone the exact same thing, expecting that will make people equal, it assumes that everyone started out in the same place. So here's an example. In this instance, we give everyone the exact same box, we treat them with equality, so that they can see over the fence. Well, that's great for the person on the left because they were already taller. But it's not so great for the person on the right who still can't see over the fence. From an equity perspective, we wouldn't want everyone to have the same size box because everyone isn't the same height to start out with. With an equity mindset, we would get everyone what they need to raise them up to the same level. As you might guess, this is where the concept of fairness gets tricky for some folks. We often think that being fair means that everybody gets the same thing. And that's what we were taught when we were growing up. But fairness really only works when we're all the same to start out with. So this is a new idea for many of us to think about. There is this great American saying that people just need to work hard enough and pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. It's this idea that everyone can be successful if you just work hard enough. Well, that's a lot easier to do when some of us were born with longer arms to pull up those bootstraps. Or maybe we were given longer bootstraps when we bought our boots. So let's think about moving away from the bootstrap idea and instead think about shoes. There is a quote by Naheed Dasani that goes, "Equality is giving everyone a shoe, but equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits."
To engage in this work from a colorblind or powerblind lens is to ignore someone's humanity. And only serves to perpetuate the inequities that we talk about dismantling.
But that would mean I should not have taught my children.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Because to think that way is to
ignore someone's humanity and only serves to perpetuate the inequities that we talk about dismantling.
Okay. Hold on. Ty, I would like you to crunch those numbers again.
It's programmed. There's no such thing
Just
as
crunch them. Just crunch them, please.
crunch.
Did it help?
All right, Committee for Children, you're up. Give me all your nonsense. Let me hear it all. Ooh, this is gonna be so good.
We have to play the long game. We have to stop looking for quick fixes, strategies, checklists, tell me what to do. We have to do deep work. And along with that comes talking about whiteness, talking about white supremacy culture and how it shows up in oppressive ways. And we have to do so simultaneously in a way that decenters whiteness, as contradictory as that may sound, but provides healing and validating spaces for BIPOC.
So if we're going to, really have a student-centered focus, then we have to be able to take ourselves out and look at our biases, no matter what background we come from, and then look at how we can dismantle that white supremacy. And that starts with decentering white voices too.
This is life work, as many of you know. Tools for having courageous conversations about that thing we never want to talk about, which is racial equity and whiteness and white supremacy. But one thing that's been really impactful in our district is doing race-based affinity spaces to provide those spaces for people to dive into the work that needs to be done in separate racial spaces, but then also we come together. We follow the work of Ruth King in our approach to affinity spaces. So those would be two things.
We also have kind of a unique system that we do. We come together as people of color and our white employees, and then that's for the first hour where we learn together, and then the second hour we separate out, and so the white employees have their space to talk things through, and the people of color employees have their space to talk through things. So, which is, I think, a unique approach.
And forget about Kraus. There's your bomber.
Wait, where is he?
That guy, Beardsley McTurbanhead.
You idiot. That's Sandhu Singh, the billionaire investor. He's a Sikh.
Oh, so if he's not a Muslim, he just gets a pass? Well, that's called profiling, Mother, and I don't do it.
We support kind of that indigenous ways of knowing for Native students. We think is a great way for them to learn outside of this kind of Western colonized education system.
I take this research base, just a little tiny bit of a grain of salt, and think we just have to think a little bit more deeply about that, because research is very steeped in dominant culture. So I just, encourage us to, again, that both and thinking, how can we continue to pull in stakeholders and community and student voice alongside some of the research and best practices, but not just centering that. To Jason's point, we must talk about what it actually means to decolonize SEL approaches. We must bring parents, families, and communities into the conversation. We must see DEI, equity efforts, and SEL as one and the same.
And I think it wraps in a lot of the questions that we've been diving into in this discussion, really thinking about how, again, it's one and the same, doing this SEL work and really trying to support the DEI work.
All right. Thank you, guys. You guys never disappoint. Okay. I want to solidify something really quick, and that's that Marxist branch. I'm going to do it through BLM. That long walk through the universities, well, they already made it through the universities, and now they've targeted your children. But I want to show you specifically, using Black Lives Matter, how it affected that organization.
Recently, an old interview resurfaced of Patrisse Cullors, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. This video depicted her saying this.
We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
But for those who know a little bit about the Marxist strategy to destroy the United States by exacerbating racial tensions in America, this was natural. Of course they're Marxists. Of course. Now, because Patrisse Cullors is a black woman, people think Black Lives Matter is a grassroots organization born out of the black community. But this is not remotely true. This is the man I showed you at the top of the show. His name is Eric Mann. Here's what Cullors had to say about Eric Mann.
I'm a trained organizer, and so I think sometimes people think that because Black Lives Matter is the biggest thing, that's the first thing I ever did, and it's not. I was trained knocking on doors, getting on buses and passing out flyers and getting people to join organizations. The Labor Community Strategy Center is my first political home. It's where I would be a part of what it's famous for, which is the Bus Riders Union.
Started by an old friend of mine,
Yes,
Eric Mann.
Eric Mann, that's my mentor.
This is the white man behind Black Lives Matter. So who is this guy? Who is the mentor of Patrisse Cullors? Who is Eric Mann? Eric Mann is a very famous Marxist. He was convicted of participating in 5 counts of assault and battery, disturbing the peace, damaging property, defacing a building, and disturbing a public assembly in 1969 as a leading member of a group called the Weather Underground, a terrorist group led by a man called Bill Ayers. The philosophy of the Weather Underground has been summed up in a quote from Bill Ayers. He said, "Kill all the rich people, break up their cars and apartments, bring the revolution home, kill your parents. That's where it's really at." According to Wikipedia, the Weather Underground adopted the belief that all white babies were tainted with the original sin of skin privilege, declaring that all white babies are pigs. And then eventually, the Weather Underground declared war on the United States.
Now we are everywhere, and next week families and tribes will attack the enemy around the country. We are not just attacking targets, we are bringing a pitiful, helpless giant to its knees.
In 1969, they rioted at Harvard University, beating staff and destroying property. They then robbed a National Guard armory and a bank, killing an officer who tried to stop them.
That radical left-wing group, the Weathermen, has claimed responsibility for yesterday's dynamiting of a statue of a Chicago policeman. The group promises more attacks on the establishment around the entire country starting next week.
They then organized riots in Chicago called the Days of Rage. They then shot into a police station in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The Weather Underground planned an attack on Army soldiers at Fort Dix and on random people at Columbia University. They developed a huge number of explosives for this purpose, but their plan failed because one of the bombs went off in their hideout, killing 3 of the Weather Underground members. They then bombed a New York police department with 10 sticks of dynamite. They then bombed the U.S. Senate building, causing hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage.
Credit for the Capitol bombing was claimed in a letter received by the Associated Press today, signed by the Weather Underground and postmarked Elizabeth, New Jersey.
There was heavy damage to the nearby barber shop. Windows were smashed there, and 100 feet away in the Senate restaurant, where tables were overturned and a priceless stained glass mosaic destroyed. Damage estimated in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Might have been far worse, but for the 3-foot-thick walls in the oldest part of the Capitol.
Thankfully, nobody was killed in that explosion. They then bombed the Pentagon by placing a bomb in the women's bathroom.
A bomb exploded early this morning in the Pentagon, and left-wing terrorists telephoned newspapers to say they were responsible. Stephen Gear reports.
The explosion destroyed one of the Pentagon's 140 women's restrooms and blasted out a wall on the 4th floor.
The Weather Underground were attempting to commit acts of terrorism against what they called U.S. imperialism. And this guy, Eric Mann, he was the mentor of Patrisse Cullors, the founder of Black Lives Matter. And so just think about this a minute. You have all of these terrorist attacks by this organization, the Weather Underground. This guy, Eric Mann, is heavily involved with them. He's got the same philosophy as they do. He is the mentor of Patrisse Cullors, the founder of Black Lives Matter. Now keep in mind that Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, and several other members of the Weather Underground eventually became university professors. Now keep in mind that Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, and several other members of the Weather Underground eventually became university professors.
And what about that are you still not getting exactly?
Well, obviously the core concept, Lana.
Now keep in mind that Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, and several other members of the Weather Underground eventually became university professors. The Weather Underground, though detestable in every sense, it wasn't a particularly effective terrorist organization. They didn't push the culture in any direction in any significant way. But there is a theory amongst Marxists called the long march through the universities. And the idea is that if Marxist ideas can be taught to several generations of university students, then eventually there will be like a cultural shift towards Marxism. And this has been effective, as we've seen. But ironically, it might be Eric Mann who has had the greatest impact, having germinated the Black Lives Matter movement through Patrisse Cullors. Now, the organization that Patrice was originally involved in, the organization in which Eric Mann was her mentor, this organization was called the Labor Community Strategic Center. The Labor Community Strategic Center lays out its philosophy this way. The Labor Community Strategic Center is an urban experiment to grassroots organizing focused in Black and Latino communities with deep historical ties to the long history of anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, pro-communist resistance to the U.S. empire. We teach and study history of the indigenous rebellions against the initial European genocide invasions, the Great Slave Haitian Revolution of the 1790s, the Great Slave Rebellions that won the U.S. Civil War, for the racist North as explained by W.E.B. Du Bois, Black Reconstruction in America. Good Lord. Just utter rubbish. Pseudo-history, fake history, promoting radicalism and craziness. But this is the part I found particularly striking. The long history of anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, pro-communist resistance to the U.S. empire. Resistance to the U.S. empire. Essentially, they are anti-America. They're against this country. That's their position. They stand in opposition to America.
Please disperse. Nothing to see here, please.
All right. I think the tree has got some stamina. I think I'm proving it pretty well that things are pretty jacked up in the SEL world. Now we have to go into the DEI world. Given its nature, things are going to get uncomfortable. Things are going to get sad. Let them. Let it affect you. Don't you dare turn it off. Don't you dare run away.
Hi, Fish. Come here. Oh, you need a name. Let's see. Wait a second. What gender are you?
A person who is transgender is someone whose internal sense of their gender, being a boy, girl, or something else, doesn't match their physical body. People who feel this way sometimes feel anxious when they begin to reach puberty and their body starts to change in ways that don't match their internal sense of their gender. These feelings are totally normal. If you feel you want more time to explore how you feel about your gender before your body starts to change, it's important to talk with a parent, counselor, therapist, or doctor about the feelings you have regarding your gender. After some discussion and counseling, you may be referred to an endocrinologist. Endocrinologists specialize in hormones, and they are the most likely to prescribe puberty blockers for someone who wants them. Puberty blockers are medications that will stop your body from changing. They are usually given as an injection or an implant. They block the production of hormones to stop or delay the physical changes of puberty. The effects of the medication are only temporary, so if a person stops using puberty blockers, the physical changes of puberty will begin again. Whether you identify as male, female, genderqueer, or something else, you're perfectly normal. And there are lots of ways to manage puberty so that it can be a fun, exciting time, rather than a scary or stressful one.
Okay, maybe you need more time to get to know yourself first. I'll just call you Bubbles for now.
My name is Jack. Nice to meet you. My name is David. Nice to meet you too.
Hi there. My name is Aaron, and I use any pronouns. What's your name, and what pronouns do you use?
Nice to meet you. My name is Jennifer. Pronouns?
Yeah, what pronouns do you use? So pronouns are things that we use every day. Mostly we use he and she, but there are also gender-neutral pronouns like they and them, and then a whole bunch of other ones.
Sometimes people want to be identified as a different a pronoun, like different from how they look.
Okay.
When we meet for the first time and introduce ourselves, that's one of the things we should say. Like, hi, my name is Jennifer, and I go by pronouns like she or her and they or them.
It's just respectful to ask before you say what pronoun you think they are. Okay. You would just say, hi, what pronoun do you like going by? Do you kind of get it? Yeah. Do you have any questions about it? No. Cool.
Like, it's good to respect people's pronouns because
You want to treat them you want to treat them with respect, since basically you want to treat them well, not bad. You get that?
Nice to meet you. What's your name?
My name is Henya, and I use she pronouns.
So what are the pronouns?
Pronouns are she, he, or they.
Why do you think that it's important for me to use she and her pronouns when I talk to you?
Because it's not nice to call someone a he when it's a girl or whenever it's a boy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for teaching me what pronouns are.
You're welcome.
All right.
I have a stuffed animal that he feels like he's transgendered. So he feels like inside he's a girl, except he's really just a boy. Oh, pretty cool.
Dripping with autism.
That he received, but Mr. McKay, I pray you are a man of your word. Last week I asked my children if I could check the books that they picked up from the school. My son picked up this brand new book from the shelves in class, Lawn Boy. He was under the impression it was about a kid that ends up at the beginning mowing the grass at Disneyland. I'd like to share a few quotes with you. This first one, just turn around. On page 19, not that it really matters in 4th grade, at a church youth group meeting out in the bushes, I touched Doug Goebel's dick and he touched mine. In fact, there was even some mouths involved. Next one, page 91. What if I told you I touched another guy's dick? What if I told you I sucked it? I was 10 years old, but it's true. I put Doug Goebel's dick in my mouth. I was in 4th grade. It was no big deal. He sucked mine too. And you know what? It wasn't terrible. Page 174. I don't know if I need to sign for this one. Yeah, I did. He talked about old times at the church, but never mentioned our penises or the fact that he never said 10 words to me after our little foray in the bushes. Not a single reference to holding or tugging or sucking dicks. All I could think about while he was chatting me up was his little salamander between my 4th grade fingers, rapidly engorging with blood. Page 230, I didn't make a sign for this. Why won't you admit we sucked each other's dicks? We shared a Hershey's bar, then you showed me your dick. The next thing I know, it's in my mouth. We suck each other's dick, and you're pretending it didn't happen. What sort of diversity are you intending to teach my child with material like this? In addition, I'll share with you the exceptional quality of vocabulary I stopped counting on page 66 after 44 fucks and 41 shits. The depravity of the content on the shelves in our schools cannot be mitigated with policy EA. At this point, I need you to know that according to policy FFH, hold this one please, local sexual harassment is defined as unwanted sexual advances, sexually motivated verbal, non-verbal conduct, or other conduct or communication of a sexual nature when the conduct is so severe, persistent, or pervasive that it affects the student's ability to participate in or
irreversible damage. The transgender craze seducing our daughters.
In the last week, for instance, the California Insurance Commissioner has said that for the purposes of insurance in California, that breast surgery, top surgery, double mastectomy on healthy breasts for even teenage girls needs to be regarded no longer as cosmetic, but something that corrects abnormal structures. Because if you've accepted the lie that a young woman who says she's a boy truly is a boy, then healthy breasts become abnormal structures. This is the corruption of language. So you must remove them regardless of her age. I wrote the book because a woman wrote to me. I had written a piece for the Wall Street Journal on transgender pronoun laws that we have in New York and California now that assign criminal and civil penalties for failing to use someone's preferred pronoun. And I pointed out that these laws are straightforwardly unconstitutional in the United States. And a reader wrote to me, she read this and she said, maybe you'll take up my issue, but I'm a mom. My daughter had no symptoms of gender dysphoria throughout, her growing up. but the gender dysphoria being the severe discomfort in one's biological sex. But she went off to college. She had a lot of mental health problems, and she went off to college, and with a group of girlfriends, they all decided they were transgender, and she started a course of testosterone. And I've had this problem. There are now an epidemic of these young girls who are in a lot of very real pain, deciding that gender must be their problem, and very quickly obtaining hormones and surgeries. And she told me that no journalist would take it up. She had written to many journalists, and I tried to find her an investigative journalist who would write about this, or at least investigate it. And when I was unable to find one, I finally, 3 months later, I got back in touch with her. I said, all right, I'll look into it. Well, I actually asked a bunch of, I conducted nearly 200 interviews for the book. And I actually asked a lot of scientists once I had some numbers, what do you call this? What is it when we have a 100-year diagnostic history of gender dysphoria, and it always afflicted boys and men. Okay. And now for the very first time in the last decade, there has been a giant surge in a different population claiming to be gender dysphoric. It has shifted from onset in young boys and to teenage girls with no childhood history, and it's shifted from men to women.
And one of the things you do document in the book is the rapid move by organizations like the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association to change the wording that they've used surrounding the discussion on gender identity. Correct?
Yes, that's right. They have changed the wording, but the bigger change, of course, is that they've gone to an affirmative care standard, which means that they no longer apply any medical judgment. They simply surrender all judgment and agree with or affirm the patient's self-diagnosis. Yes, a sword of Damocles hangs over professionals' heads now. And what it says is you must agree with the patient's self-diagnosis. Put another way, it suggests that you should begin with the conclusion. Your conclusion must be that this person has gender dysphoria, and then you can, go along from there and start prescribing treatments. That's not how medicine or any other area of therapy is practiced. You don't begin with the conclusion. You investigate it, because all the doctors who disagree, and there are many, and they're speaking up all the time, are silenced. They are told that they could lose their license if they don't immediately affirm the adolescent, no matter what her other mental health problems are, and immediately go along with facilitating her transition. All I'm pointing out in the book is that there seems to be a sudden rise in these teenage girls who are subject to peer influence and social media influence, deciding they're transgender, and there are no medical safeguards for these girls. There's no means right now, and no one determining whether they actually have the correct diagnosis before proceeding to treatment. In Britain, where they have centralized medical care, they can tell you that the number of young women being referred for gender treatment has exploded over 4,000% in the last decade. Okay. In America, we don't have centralized medical care, and you don't even need a diagnosis of gender dysphoria to start treatment. You can start a course of testosterone without ever having received a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So they're a little harder to come by, but here's what I can tell you. In 2018, 2% of high school students said they were transgender. So that's 2 in 100 kids. That's an enormous increase over what was historically the rate of gender dysphoria in the population, which was 0.01%. So 1 in 10,000 people. Went from roughly 1 in 10,000 people to 2 in 100 high school students. We also know that between 2016 and 2017, the number of females requesting gendered surgery in the United States quadrupled. So we know these are the exploding rates. And then, of course, I've interviewed many therapists, and Lisa Littman of Brown University did her survey. And when you talk to therapists, when you talk to parents, you get the same thing over and over. And that is that the leading demographic asking for gender transition is teenage girls with no childhood history of gender dysphoria. You're seeing among this population, we know that rates of suicide and depression are rising as social acceptance of gender dysphoria is going, or transgender identification is going up. But we would have predicted that those things going down with social acceptance. Instead, it seems to be, coincident and comorbid with teenage girls' mental health crisis.
Again, I think somebody left the sliding glass door open and Grandpa walked out and ended up on a set talking crazy. The dude is nuts. I don't care what color you are. You spew that crap, that insanity. I'm going to call the dudes in the white coats and be like, I got one for you, dude. I got like 10 of them. They're all hanging out together. I don't even know what the deal is. Dude, you are nuts. Who gives you any time of day to speak? You're that crazy. But we'll listen. We just won't teach it to our kids. Right, educators? You do see now, right? That you are feeding our children fruit from a poisonous tree. We got you. The parents have got you. We're going to fix this. You just need to realize it. That's it. All right, we're going to end on a good note. It's going to seem like a bad note at the beginning, but it's going to be a good note. Parents, our teachers need us. The good principals, they need us now to understand this stuff, to understand it's heading our way. Your school is not special. It will overtake you at a certain point, no matter if you're in Greenville, South Carolina, or Alaska, or I don't care where you are. Look what they've done thus far. We need to stop this.
When you talk about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other, that's pretty much, I don't care what you say, it's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids, this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You're going to purposely tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get, first of all, time out, because I only got 5 minutes now, 5 minutes. 2 medical degrees, no mom, no dad in the house, worked my way through college, sat there and hustled my butt off to get through college. You gonna tell me somebody that looked like all y'all white folks kept me from doing that? Are you serious? Not one white person ever came to me and say, well, son, you're never going to be able to get nowhere because you know the black people. But guess what? What's sickening about this whole thing is what y'all doing right now is already something I do in my community right now to speak out against stuff because black folks are getting told by other black folks, oh, you know you ain't going to be able to do nothing out there in the world because them white folks ain't going to let you get no, oh, you know you're not going to be able to do it because you know, the white man going to keep you down. Well, how did I get where I am right now? Are you going to sit here and tell me this lie of critical race theory? This the reason why black folks can't get ahead because of white folks? Are you kidding me? This is what we come to now. I can't believe we even talking about this right now. The last thing I'm going to say right here is something that's crazy. Martin Luther King said he wanted his kids to grow up in a world where they are judged by the contents of their what? Their character, not their skin. If they letting this stuff go on right now, it is absolutely doing the complete reverse of what he's doing. So when February comes, don't talk about Martin Luther King. I'm in the hood. I'm in the communities. I'm out there with folks in their face. I've been doing this stuff since I was 18 years old, talking to black folks. And you know what? None of them are buying this nonsense. None of them are. But if you want to implement this into the school system, I guarantee you to the day that I die, I'm going to be the very person right there debunking stuff, tearing stuff down, letting them know they can do exactly what I did and get exactly where I am by putting themselves to work and getting there. And ain't not one white person ever going to keep any of them from getting there. So the CRT stuff, BS.
CRT is not racial sensitivity or simply teaching unfavorable American history or teaching Jim Crow history. CRT is deeper and more dangerous than that. CRT, in its outworking today, is a teaching that there is a hierarchy in society where white, male, heterosexual, able-bodied people are deemed the oppressor, and anyone else outside of that status is oppressed. If this continues, we will look back and be responsible for the dismantling of the greatest country in the world by reverting to teaching hate and that race is a determining factor on where your destiny lies.
CRT is racist. It is abusive. It discriminates against one's color. I had to come down here today to tell you to your face that we are coming together and we are strong. This will not be the last. Greet and meet respectfully.
Daddy teaches you can be anything in this world that you want to be, right? Don't Daddy teach you that?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you're black or white or any color.
Doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, yellow. Right?
Black.
And how we treat people is based on who they are and not what color they are.
And if they're nice and smart.
See? This is how children think right here. Critical race theory wants to end that.
Even though you don't know anyone, you can make friends.
Yeah, you can make friends, no matter what color they are. So we need to stop CRT, period, point blank. Children do not see skin color, man. They love everybody. If they're good people, they love them.
We pray for people that are hurt.